celebrating 3 years of bringing you the very best in LGBT talk programming. This is Q Talk America.
And good Wednesday, good decision day, and welcome to the agenda. I am Rebecca Wininger, your co-host, or actually your host for tonight, and I'm joined by some different people in the studio tonight because our my regular co-host, Miss Kathy Young, I believe is someplace in Las Vegas at this time, and Mr. Bill Farmer, I believe, is still at work. God love him. But tonight I am joined on the technical side and occasional peanut gallery comment by Mr. Joe. Co-host of the Joe and Babe show, or is it the Babe and Joe show? Who gets top billing?
I don't know.
Depends on who wins the battle that night. Mr. John Phoebus and Mr. Grant Miller.
Hello.
Both all activists extraordinaire. So.
Good evening.
Yeah. Listen to that. Good evening.
Good evening.
Good evening.
So as always, and especially on his historic day, and we might actually go more than our hour show today since we got a whole lot to talk about. Feel free to call in. You can reach us at 888-791-9294, or as always, join us in our equality chat room at qtalkamerica.com. And hit the little chat button, and we are available to read your comments. And I know lots of people got lots of comments tonight. So, because lots have been happening. You know, see, it's the anniversary of Michael Jackson's death. New England Patriot Aaron Hernandez got arrested for potentially murdering somebody. And I think there were a couple of little Supreme Court decisions today, too. So, let's see. And I think we're going to be trying to do some new technology tonight as well, because somebody didn't clear the... Hey, Tupper's back! Yay! Might be trying some new technology tonight with some video. We also have the lovely Tara Borelli from Lambda Legal calling in a few minutes and will join us. So, or she's actually on now? No.
She's ready now.
Oh.
I think.
Oh, she's here? You think? Yeah. Well, should we push a button and find out? Hello.
Hi.
This is Hillary Clinton. How are you?
Hi, Rebecca. I am indeed here.
Wonderful. So it's a completely inside joke. Every time one calls Lambda Legal in California and probably anywhere, the first thing you do is you hit where you want to go to talk to whom, and then it says, what's your name? And so like the first couple times I called Tara, I was like, oh, Rebecca Wininger. And then from then I've moved on. So now it's Michelle Obama, Hillary Clinton, and other people calling Tara. Just one of these days she'll believe it, but right now she doesn't. So
it keeps the day so exciting. I love it.
There we go. So, Tara, I know, I don't think I know how to properly introduce you. I realize that you're a staff attorney there at Lambda Legal out in the California office, but do you specialize in something specific?
Well, at the moment, I have the great privilege of working on a number of cases having to do with relationship recognition for same-sex couples, and I am so especially excited to be on a show in Arizona because the state has had a really special place in my heart since at least 2009, when we had the honor of stepping up to represent state employees who were at risk of having their family health benefits stripped by Jan Brewer and the legislature, and we've been litigating that case, Diaz versus Brewer, ever since, and so I feel a very special connection to the state. And we've also been keeping very busy with marriage equality challenges in Nevada and a host of other places in the country. So for those who don't know Lambda Legal, we're the oldest and largest legal nonprofit in the country advocating for the full rights of LGBT people, and I'm privileged to be an attorney there.
Wow. Sounds like you have a busy life.
Well, these are exciting times to be doing the work, that's for sure.
Yes. So clearly we had some good news today coming out, both in the Windsor case and in the Perry case. And why don't we try to do like a 60,000 foot level to our listeners? Because, I'll be honest with you, I have been doing interview after interview today, and I've been keeping my answers very much at the 60,000 foot level, because when we start to get into the nitty gritty, I'm really not sure anybody knows where we're going yet.
Are you telling me you don't want a 45-minute monologue on the intricacies of standing? I was really excited to deliver that. Yes, let's keep it at 60,000 feet. So the really important historic takeaway is that on a procedural ruling that the Supreme Court decided that the case that the proponents had brought to it, trying to defend Proposition 8, was not properly before the court. The proponents didn't have a right to be there. And the major effect of that ruling is that we revert back to that lovely, beautiful trial court win for same-sex couples. The decision of Judge Von Walker now is the governing law of the land in California, and that means that in approximately 1 month, wedding bells will be ringing again for same-sex couples in the Golden State. So that's incredibly exciting. And then the other major victory today came in Windsor, which is a challenge to Section 3 of the Defense of Marriage Act, so-called Defense of Marriage Act. And this really had to do with a different legal question, which was, once you're already validly married, can the federal government refuse to recognize your marriage, as has been the law since DOMA was enacted in 1996? And the court struck down DOMA in a 5-4 decision, and that means that for those couples who are validly married, particularly those who are living in a state where their marriage is recognized, they should have clear and almost immediate entitlement to every federal right and responsibility as soon as the court's decision becomes final, and it will also happen in approximately 1 month.
Wow. So did I've been getting in this question all day, and my answer was not really. Did either decision surprise you? I mean, and it's kind of a two-parter. Did either actual decision surprise you, and did the way that some of the justices voted surprise you?
I think I'm on the same page with you. I think a lot of people predicted after the oral arguments. I mean, you never want to read too much into those because people can surprise you. See Obamacare. I think that was a big surprise to lots of folks. But sometimes you really can get a sense of where the court is going after an oral argument. I have to say the biggest maybe surprise for me today is sort of, again, stepping back and looking at everything from a larger picture historical view. As many people know, today may not only be the anniversary of Michael Jackson's passing, but it is the 10th anniversary of Lawrence versus Texas. And this was a Lambda Legal case that went to the Supreme Court in 2003, 10 years ago, where the court struck down all the remaining bans on sodomy across the country. And here's the just totally incredible thing, and that is that on that 10th anniversary, so when Lawrence was decided, there were 13 states still at that time that criminalized same-sex couples' intimate, private relationships. Now, just 10 years later, we've moved to a point where with the decisions today, we now have 13 states that marry same-sex couples. And it's just an incredible journey, and I think it has probably happened a lot more quickly than many of us ever predicted.
Wow. So, yeah, and it seems like the momentum just keeps rolling for us because now we have legislative victories, we have judicial victories, and we have ballot initiative victories. So, I mean, it's not one or the other. It's everything seems to be falling into place for us.
Mm-hmm. And at the same time, let's not give short shrift to the many people who will have to continue to fight, particularly given the fact that the marriage ruling today on Proposition 8 affected only California. There's an incredible need for all the activists out there who are doing the work they've been doing for a very long time, including your very own Equality Arizona, to keep up the fight for same-sex couples, because while time is on our side, it certainly won't all happen on its own. So I think we have to keep fighting so that we can see victories blossom just like the ones we had today.
Yes, definitely. Now, one of the questions I've been getting all day, and I like, well, we really don't know right now, is what is the effect What does today's rulings mean for couples who are legally married in what I'm calling a freedom state, one of the 13 states, but then suddenly move to, say, Arizona? I mean, do we know enough? Do we know enough tonight to kind of sort of answer that question?
Oh, well, I suspect lots of people won't be totally satisfied with the answer, but I will tell you what we know. It is what it is. So, in other words, you can actually think of this as a total lawyer answer, which means I'm going to duck it. So here's what we know. There's some uncertainty, and it's going to take some work to sort it out. And the one thing that I want to reassure your listeners of is that Lambda Legal and all of our sister LGBT groups are working very hard with and pressuring the administration right now to solve the problem of couples who've gotten married in a state but then live somewhere where their marriage isn't recognized. Here's why it's complicated and why we don't know the answer. So, for couples who live in one of these wondrous 13 states with marriage equality, for them it's very, very clear because really under any federal rule, that marriage will be recognized as valid. It was valid when it was entered. It's valid right now where they live. For couples like those who may be married in California and moved to Arizona or lived there to start with, what's complicated is that there are such a host of federal rights and responsibilities and different programs and benefits, and they've all got different rules about how they decide whether a marriage is valid. So some of them look to, was the marriage valid where it was entered? And so for those rules, which include some immigration rules at least, marriages should be valid no matter what a person's home state says about that marriage. Some other rules and programs look to whether your marriage is valid where you live. That's obviously a problem for couples who live in a state like Arizona. But the vast majority don't actually say anything at all. They don't have a rule, they don't have a law or a regulation that says how marriage should be determined as valid or invalid. And that's why we think there's actually great power and freedom for the administration to move quickly and swiftly and to end the confusion by directing the different agencies to make new rules that say they will recognize the place of celebration. That is, was the marriage valid when the couple entered into it? And that's how things should be measured to the fullest extent permitted by federal law, because that's the intention of the couple. And we think we'll get there for the vast majority of benefits, but that will look different for different agencies. Some of them will have to engage in rulemaking. That could take up to a year. Others could just change policies that they have on the book, maybe with the stroke of a pen. So we'll be working very, very hard to get down into the details and to make sure that the administration is doing everything it can as fast as it can.
Yeah, and you talk about somebody doing something for the stroke of a pen, and for those of us, like myself, who were arguing a few months ago about whether or not Chuck Hagel was qualified to be Secretary of Defense, I don't even think the ink was dry on the Supreme Court rulings when, he made it right. And part of his statement today said the Department of Defense the department will immediately begin the process of implementing the Supreme Court's decision in consultation with the Department of Justice and other executive branch agencies. The Department of Defense intends to make the same benefits available to all military spouses, regardless of sexual orientation, as soon as possible. That it is now law, and it is the right thing to do. Every person who serves our nation in uniform step forward with courage and commitment. All that matters is their patriotism, their willingness to serve their country, and their qualifications to do so. Today's ruling helps ensure that all men and women who serve this country can be treated fairly and equally with the full dignity and respect they so richly deserve. So clearly, if you live in Arizona and you live on Luke Air Force Base or, what's the one down in Tucson? The big one. Davis-Monthan. As long as you stay on the base, you're fully protected. As soon as you step off the base, you're back in Arizona and you're screwed. So, all right. So if you guys got questions for Tara, please jump in too, because I can monopolize this conversation. Since you mentioned, and I thought this was kind of interesting because I know everybody else was busy kind of checking out SCOTUS today and the rulings and stuff, but I also like to dig in. And I noticed that on their docket today, there was a certain case that you're attached to that the Supreme Court was kind of thinking about maybe whether or not they wanted to hear it. And can you share with us any of that?
Absolutely. So we're on the edge of our seats. I think everybody, of course, was waiting with bated breath for the decisions on Proposition 8 and DOMA. But what folks may not realize is there were a number of other cases actually pending up in front of the court, including a federal marriage equality case that we brought out of Nevada. But also what's particularly on our minds this evening is Diaz versus Brewer, and that is Lambda Legal's case on behalf of the state employees who are at risk of losing their family coverage. I have to say this case has been going on for years. The other side has managed to string it out with appeal after appeal after appeal, far longer than I think we ever predicted. But what they've managed to do is we obtained an order at the trial court that required that the benefits have to stay in place for these workers at least while the case is pending. And the defendants took that order and immediately appealed it to the Ninth Circuit, and we persuaded a 3-court judge that we were right. The benefits should remain secure at least while the case is pending. The defendants didn't like that. They tried to get a full panel of the Ninth Circuit to hear the case, and the Ninth Circuit said thanks but no thanks. And then the defendants asked the Supreme Court last summer to consider hearing this case, Diaz versus Brewer. And actually at that time, the court ended up collecting up that request, that petition for review, and conferenced it. They considered it with the petitions from Prop 8 and from DOMA. Those were all considered together in December. And we, as the victors in this case so far, of course, we're hoping that there would be no grant of review. We really like the Ninth Circuit decision that we got. We think it's a beautiful opinion, and no need for the Supreme Court to weigh in. The Ninth Circuit got it right, and so we were waiting to see exactly what would happen. And then, of course, on that day in December, the Supreme Court took the Proposition 8 case, took the DOMA case, and did not act on the petition to hear Diaz versus Brewer. And it has actually remained pending at the court ever since then. Now that the decisions in Prop 8 and DOMA have issued, the court decided to take back up the defendant's request to hear the case, and they considered it at a conference today, and we will know at 6:30 a.m. Pacific time tomorrow what they decided to do. And we're really, really hopeful that they will simply dismiss the petition and send this case back down to the trial court where it belongs.
No, correct me if I'm wrong, but if the Supreme Court had ruled today in California as opposed to just booting it on standing, I mean, it's a similar case in Diaz versus Brewer, because basically what you're saying is you granted gay people these rights and then you took them away because they're gay. I mean, is that kind of a really simplified way of saying it? I mean, so would an actual ruling in California today would have helped you in this case?
You know, any equal protection ruling that recognizes the equal dignity of same-sex couples is helpful, absolutely. There are some differences with Diaz. One, for example, is that even though you're talking about the takeaway feature, which the Ninth Circuit relied on in the Proposition 8 case, where part of their narrow opinion was to say, we're examining California's unique circumstances where marriage was afforded to couples and then it was removed, and it's in those specific circumstances that we find equal protection is violated. Our argument in Diaz has actually been a little bit different and broader in some ways. Our position there has been the state always should have been treating its gay and lesbian workers equally. Whether it gave them in the first place and then tried to take them away, whether it had never given the benefits at all, the crux of the case is really that gay and lesbian employees are performing their jobs and offering the state valuable public service, just like every colleague of theirs, and health coverage for one's family is really important compensation. Everybody knows how important those spousal benefits are, and making those impossible for gay people to get because they can't get married, well, there's simply no good reason for that, and it doesn't treat them equally. So we haven't relied on that takeaway feature at all. But equal protection is a common thread running throughout these cases. And so certainly if the court had weighed in on Proposition 8 on the merits, we would have been looking very carefully at what it had said. But this case has been succeeding on its own from the beginning, and so we're very confident about our ability to continue to carry it forward.
So it sounds like as we continue this conversation that this is just the start of a much more prolonged process of kind of tying up those loopholes and making sure that across the country that we have consistent laws that regulate same-sex marriage, benefits, and all of these things, correct?
Yes, you just put it beautifully, I have to say. A lot of the uncertainty that I talked about earlier about, what does this mean for couples who live in Arizona and married somewhere else, that sort of complication is just not going to be solved until there is coast-to-coast marriage equality. At the moment, it's sort of like people have to go through life with, a constitutional law professor on one arm and an attorney on the other, and, who can go through life that way? What we need is one uniform family protection system, which is marriage, available to people everywhere. And maybe one note for people to keep in mind is never fear. The next generation of cases is already in the courts. Obviously, we work very hard to be constantly planning 5 steps ahead. And so we anticipated that the Prop 8 case may not go the distance and answer the question for the whole country. And so we had marriage equality litigation in the works. And so there's a case out of Nevada right now paired with another case out of Hawaii that asks a similar question about whether marriage is required in those states. And that's pending actually at the Ninth Circuit. And so there's already another wave planned. And there will be tireless work on this until we get to the right answer everywhere in the country.
Now, when DOMA came down, I know there were a lot of people in our community that heard Kennedy's ruling and saw the little bit of opening about the Equal Protection Clause. And I already had a number of questions and interviews today where it's like, this is going to open the way for lawsuits, isn't it? So do you think that, did you kind of see that as well when that little nugget came up?
Yeah, let's just talk about this for a moment, because I think there are, a few really remarkable things about Kennedy's decision in DOMA. And as many of your listeners may know, it was no surprise that this decision came from Kennedy. He authored the 2 seminal decisions that preceded the decisions today, one in Lawrence versus Texas and one in Romer versus Evans. And this decision is signature Justice Kennedy with an emphasis on the equal dignity and worth of same-sex couples. But the thing that just struck me today was his focus on the children of same-sex couples whose families are shut out of recognition of their marriages by DOMA. So, as many people know, there's been a mixed record of marriage cases across the country with a number of disappointing decisions where various courts have rejected marriage equality claims. And that's to be expected. No movement is, one straight sail into victory. But when we have lost those cases, they have virtually all been on grounds relating to children, where the courts have expressed doubts about whether, there are issues with same-sex parents raising children. Now, as we all know, we make equally fine parents. Our children are equally well-adjusted, thank you very much, and same-sex couples have been and will continue to parent their children for a very long time to come. There just is no good excuse to put those families out in the cold. And so what a remarkable thing to have Kennedy, instead of using children against us, which has happened in some of these disappointing losses, instead actually recognizing that to the extent anybody's children are harmed by discrimination against our relationships, it's our children. And he had this just incredible line where he said, DOMA humiliates tens of thousands of children being raised by same-sex couples. It makes them difficult to understand the integrity and the closeness of their own family. And he talked about the concern that by having these children be told that their families are second class, it would be hard for them to understand that their families are and should be on equal footing with other families. And that is just extraordinary. And I think that's an observation that will cut across a series of cases. And he got it right.
We actually have a caller on the line. Jim, do you have a question for us, or probably more for Tara, I'm thinking?
Hi, how are you?
Good, how are you?
I'm doing great. It's not so much a question, it's just I wanted to kind of join in on the conversation for a minute. I'm actually driving to the airport right now to pick up a man who very well may be the love of my life. and I haven't seen him in 2 years. And today we're not just celebrating our reunion, but we are celebrating the announcement from the Supreme Court. I'm in the military, and because of today's decision, my future husband will have the peace of mind now that if I'm wounded or killed in combat, that he can be notified, or he can be at my bedside, that he can help make those decisions on my behalf. Or if I get stationed somewhere else in the country or somewhere else in the world, he will be able to come with me and have the financial support and backing of the DOD and military institution. I know there's a long way to go as far as making all that happen and the funding and all the things that are going to have to, the red tape that's going to have to be jumped through. But the fact that this has happened, honestly, has given me a great peace of mind, and I feel like I'm not a second-class citizen anymore. I have had a lot of people ask me, how can you defend a country that doesn't see you as a whole person? And I've always replied that I wear this uniform. I guess I should say this in past tense now, but I wore this uniform not in necessarily support or defense of what we stand for now, but to protect our future and hopes of what we might become. And now I can wear this uniform much more proudly because my government recognizes me, and I really feel like now I am a part of this society as much as everybody else.
Well, first off, I'll let John jump in here since.
I was just going to say, wow.
Yeah.
Wow. I mean, that's what it's all about. Thank you for your service. We're in awe of pioneers like yourself that are out there defending this country, and that, to me, is just what it's all about.
Of course.
And congratulations on finding the potential love of your life too. This has got to be. It's got to be a great feeling for you. I mean, especially if you haven't seen him for 2 years. Yeah, that's okay to be nervous. You got a lot to celebrate.
Yes, absolutely.
Well, awesome.
Thank you so much for your commentary, and I really appreciate listening in.
Yes, and thank you for calling in, and good luck.
Thank you, Jeremiah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, bye.
Wow. And I know this is a day for celebration, but I was also thinking today about all the straight allies that helped us get here, about all of the people that went before us that couldn't enjoy this day, like the Harvey Milks, everybody in our AIDS epidemic who just basically got ignored, people who, put their lives on the line and potentially lost them for us, whether it's been the military or other actions. And, what a great day for those of us who live here today. But so many people went before, and we owe so much to so many.
Well, and I think for the younger generation of LGBT youth, this is a historic day for us as well, because this does connect us to the larger struggle and the fight for equality that has been ongoing for the past 50, 60, 70 years.
Definitely. So Tara, I'm nervous, I'll be honest with you, because my fear is that we're going to see gay marriage continue to go across the nation, and ENDA is going to sit in Congress for another 20 years. I mean, and I just see it now that employers that don't really want to embrace this and don't want to pay the extra benefits, I'm a great worker and everything's great, and I come in and say, I got married this weekend. I need to sign my partner up now for benefits. And they go, oh, well, you're gay, you're fired. And there's nothing I can do to protect that now.
I couldn't agree with you more. And before I jump in on that point, I do just want to say a special thank you to that caller who called in and echo the appreciation for his service. I happen to think that is among the most powerful examples of why it's just so totally unjustified that this country would discriminate against its, gay and lesbian citizens, including because of the many, many people who put their lives on the line and do dangerous jobs. And there are people who do that in lots of different capacities, whether it's serving the state of Arizona in law enforcement, whether it's serving our country in combat. And it just goes to show that there's just no good reason to deny people equality. We're making some of the ultimate sacrifices for our country, and that sort of service and commitment to country, I think, really, really deserves to be recognized. But back to your other point, my goodness, there's so much to do. The HIV and AIDS epidemic continues to rage on today, and to have incredibly distressing disparities in terms of who's affected by it, and we're just seeing that, many of the people who lack resources are among the most affected, and we need to do our best as a community to right that wrong. Employment discrimination. So you may have been tracking the fact that in Idaho, for example, there have been a number of municipalities that have enacted their own anti-discrimination ordinances, and some of the stories that people are sharing are just a heart-rending reminder of how hard we need to work to make sure that we bring equality to every corner of every state, really in every aspect of life, and that means beyond marriage. That means workplace protections, just like you've said. But one example of a story that was shared during testimony about these local ordinances was there are people in that state who have suffered, for example, hate crimes, and have been afraid to report them to the police because of the risk that it would become publicly known and they would be fired from their jobs, and there would be no recourse for them because there's no such protection in Idaho as in many, many other places. I think you're exactly right. We can't lose the focus and the energy and the momentum on the full range of issues and need to continue the fight.
Well,
Go ahead.
I was going to say at the beginning of this last year, I started teaching, and I had to go in and sit down with my principal and vice principal and basically ask, so when I signed my contract, I saw that there was no protection for sexual orientation. Does this put my job at risk? And that just struck me as I should not have to ask my employer if my job is safe simply for the fact that I'm gay. And then just this last weekend, I was in New York, walking down the street in New York City, where you think it is a welcome and accepting place, had a recent string of hate crimes, and a man with malicious intent walked past me and acted like he was shooting me and made like noises as if he was firing a gun. And so, I mean, those are very tangible reminders that, like you were saying, that this full range of issues is very important, and it must continue to be put in the spotlight. Marriage equality is an engine towards full equality, and it's incredibly important, but we also have to worry about all of these other issues as well.
Tara,
And Arizona's it's a perfect example of that. And I have to say, some of the antics that we saw coming out of the legislature this session with the so-called No Lou for You bill.
Right.
We have so much work to do on behalf of our transgender brothers and sisters who continue to face just absolutely appalling levels of discrimination, lack of access to employment, let alone appropriate health care. And there remains just rampant discrimination with health coverage policies that contain nearly universal exclusions for transition-related care. I mean, that's outrageous. And so I really credit folks in Arizona who know all too well that these full range of battles have to be fought, and who really did just a brilliant, valiant job of defeating the hateful No Lou for You bill, and who understand that we've really got to be focused on the full range of issues, and are doing it very, very well.
So and I just keep going back to the Civil Rights Act, which basically wiped inequality based on race across the board, across the nation in one fell swoop. And we seem like we're trying to piecemeal equality, through gay marriage, state by state, through ENDA, which, I just don't see it with the current Congress going through with the T attached. And we cannot abandon that, because if we do, it will never come back around. I'm just convinced of that. But do we potentially see that maybe over the next couple of years we get another 10 states under our belt with gay marriage? Maybe we challenge the Equal Protection Clause in a couple of areas, and then we just have some case that is like the civil rights sweeping bill that we really need for full equality across the nation?
good question. I think the answer will probably be different for different kinds of protections. There's no doubt that we need ENDA, which would be in some ways equivalent to the statute Title VII, which offers protection in employment against discrimination based on race and sex and ethnicity and religion. And as we all know, notwithstanding those protections, those forms of discrimination remain real and terrible and just depressingly present. And let me just say, I hope I'm not talking over anyone. I thought I heard a voice. There are a couple of additional things that I think are important for all of us to have in mind, and that is, while we may be thrilled with the results of Windsor and Hollingsworth, there were some incredibly distressing and depressing opinions that came out in the days before. And these are opinions that we should all care about and that affect so many of us. And of course, I'm talking about the Voting Rights Act, I'm talking about affirmative action, and I'm talking about some incredibly depressing employment decisions. And I think that just points to the idea that a whole lot of people are continuing to really have to struggle to make equality not just a promise in the laws, but a lived experience. And I think it's just really, really important for us to remember that we've got to link arms, that all of these battles are our battles. They affect our community, they affect our allies, and we all need to be working together across the full spectrum of different kinds of discrimination that people are experiencing.
The one nice thing about being an internet radio show is, first off, we don't have to watch what we say, because the FCC won't come knocking.
I didn't know that.
Yes, you
Oh,
can.
man.
You can say any
Open
word.
season.
What the hell?
It pretty much. And believe me,
that's
I've
pretty polite.
yes, I've gone off a couple of times.
By Jiminy.
Oh. But the other nice thing about being on the internet is if you've got an internet connection, you can you can listen to us when we broadcast. And my understanding is we actually have a call from Turkey on the line.
Wow.
So, mystery caller from Turkey. Hello? Hello? I don't know how to say hello in Turkish, so. There we go. I hear background noise. Is somebody on the line?
Caller with last four digits 7444. You're on the air.
Hello, this is Amanda Sarman. I'm calling from Kentucky.
Oh, Kentucky. So that's great. So how does the internet go from translate Kentucky to Turkey? That's kind of funny.
That's what you get for cheap.
Yeah. Well, maybe.
I'm 7444.
Yeah. Well, maybe that's an Arizona thing too. Translation. Sorry, Amanda.
How are you all?
We are well.
Doing well.
What's up with you tonight?
Well, we're having a terrible storm, and we have terrible internet connection out this way. So if I cut in and out, I'm hoping it doesn't happen. But I would just want to respond to your previous caller had made some really valid points. And one of the things that I think we really need to not lose sight of is that I think for a lot of people who have had a pretty easy go of life in the United States, even after the Reagan years, sometimes they think of these victories as their victory. We did this for the gay and lesbian community, or we do this for the black and the marginalized community. But I think that I really take umbrage with some of the language that's associated with these what we call have victories. I mean, if you look at equality, still not there, and I was heartened to see what happened with DOMA today. I was heartened to see what happened with Prop 8, but I really caution Americans to read deeply into what actually happened and to recognize that in the 21st century, these issues should not even be discussed anymore. We should be well beyond this, and there are countries that are. And I don't know what is keeping America back from being what we can be, where civil rights, where human rights, where civil liberties are concerned. So while I harbor a lot of hope about what happened, I still harbor a lot of angst, and I'm hoping as a country we can continue to work toward full equality for every human being.
I think we've
Here,
made.
here. Cheers to that.
Yeah.
And that's, I don't feel hopeless about what happened, but I'm just kind of tempered about it, I suppose. And I've been beating myself up all day for feeling that way. But I live in Kentucky. Rand Paul is my senator, and I feel really embarrassed about that. So there are things that we need to know that we still need to do as just by virtue of being a human being with a brain that cogitates at least some of the day.
Amanda,
part of the day.
what would you say the response has been in that portion of the country to the rulings today?
Well, in Kentucky, there is an entity called the Fairness Campaign, and it's the fairness.org. And I think that people on the Louisville, Lexington side probably are very excited. Mm-hmm. But I still think that it's that jubilation that should everybody should feel, and for good reason. But I think that the larger part of Kentucky is still dragged down by some of the sentiments that's come out of Rand Paul's comments this afternoon about joking, which to me any serious politician should never interface with Glenn Beck, but to even make light of. Well, if somebody calls in and says, well, next thing you know, I'll be marrying my dog. That's a ridiculous false analogy that has no place in serious politics.
That's just insulting.
He should have, shut him down and said, or else at least dropped his mic and got up and walked away. So I think that as long as politicians like Rand Paul continue to court people like Glenn Beck in order to placate maybe 70% of his constituency in this state, that we still have a serious problem that we need to confront. And we're not there. I mean, as long as the American South continues to be a drag, I don't know how to deal with this. And I just had a huge argument with my husband about the Paula Deen thing. And that was a terrible thing what she said. But I said, she speaks for her entire culture. So, where do you draw the line?
And I would just remind everyone.
Hello?
You're still here. I always just try to remind everybody that everyone's human. I mean, I've said things that I regret, used words that I've regretted that have hurt people, and I wish I could take them back, but I can't. And all I can do is apologize for them and go on and be better. Words, as much as they say, sticks and stones can break my bones, but words can never hurt me. That's not true. I mean, there are things that we say every day that probably hurt people
exactly.
that we don't even realize.
Mm-hmm.
And as towards the March for Equality, we're no longer in the baby step stage. I would say we're making strides, but it is going to take time.
Right. Exactly.
So
we're a very young country.
Yeah.
But I just I'm committed to continuing this fight. I don't like the idea that 35 states in this union still, don't recognize same-sex marriage as valid. I am committed to repealing the 2006 constitutional amendment in Kentucky, and I've already written letters and, started mobilizing some people who I think will get behind that to repeal that law based on, the DOMA overturned today. So I think that in and itself is impetus for states that are going to deny same-sex couples from marriage. If we can use this ruling today to say, okay, we have this amendment, let's get rid of it.
Yeah.
And that's awesome. And what I would encourage you to do, if you haven't already, is reach out to HRC, see if they have some people in the Kentucky area. Check in with Freedom to Marry to see if they're coalesced with anybody there in the Kentucky area, because those are two national powerhouses that will have an understanding of who in your area has already maybe started that work.
Well, and at the same time, I think that underscores that even in the states that do not have marriage equality, that there are grassroots efforts that are present, I'm sure, in every one of those states. So this is a national movement, and it is present in all 50 states. So thank you so much for your perspective on that, Amanda.
Well,
I sure do appreciate you guys taking my call.
yeah, keep up the battle out there in the wilderness, but
Sure will.
you know,
Sure will.
To me, the progress we've made in 30 years is nothing short of astonishing. And there's
It is, agreed.
yeah, there's a graphic right now I'm looking at on the New York Times from Nate Silver, the guy who predicted Obama's election almost down to the number. And he points out a couple of really amazing statistics. In January 2004, there were less than 10 million people in the United States who would be eligible for marriage equality. Now we are at just under 100 million. So in 9 years, we've gone up 10 times. And then here's the number that completely blows your socks off. In the entire world, by August in 2013, 585 million people will be living in jurisdictions where same-sex marriage is legal. 585 million. That's
awesome.
Right, almost 20% of the human race. So I know we've got a long way to go and a short time to get there, but I think we can also pat ourselves on the back a little bit that we have gone farther, faster than any disadvantaged group in the history of the world. We're clawing our way back, and there's no turning back.
And I just hope the American South catches up sooner rather than later.
Amen, sister.
They don't want to be on the wrong side of history on this. So.
And as far
Thanks,
as
you guys.
oh, you're so welcome. And
Go ahead.
as far as the stupid comments go, like with your senator and stuff, there was a candidate last a couple elections ago who was running against John McCain on the Republican side. His name is J.D. Hayworth, and he's an absolute idiot. But when someone
I remember him.
and that's putting it nicely. And when somebody asked him about gay marriage, he was like, "Oh, you let them marry each other, and then they go and they want to marry their horse." And I said, and my response to that was,
God.
"Well, clearly somebody allowed your wife to marry a horse's ass, so why wouldn't it be okay?" So
Somebody had commented that, well, maybe I could just smear a bunch of peanut butter on myself and attract a nice dog. And I said, you can smother all the peanut butter you want, but that dog is not going to sign the legal consent to marry you. And if he could, he probably wouldn't because you're mean.
Yeah.
So, dogs don't like mean people. So I'm very excited, but I know that there's still a little bit of work left to do. So.
And thank you for all your work, and thank you for calling in.
Thank you.
You are welcome.
All right.
You guys have a good night.
You too.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Oh, yes, J.D. Hayworth. Some of my friends. So Tupper, I'm sitting here in the chat room with Tupper, and he says, I have to say, I said, what'd you think about today's decisions? And he says, I have to say I was not optimistic, but today I couldn't be happier overall. And he said, he got a proposal today too. And I said, like a marriage proposal? And he said, yes.
Well, congratulations.
I know. Way to go, Tupper. So Tara, you've been sitting there listening to calls, and I'll be honest with you, we've gotten more calls tonight than we ever have on any other show. So it's kind of scary.
That's impressive.
But I know. Hey, see, you draw them in. So, anything you want to conclude with? I mean, then we'll let you go and go home and be with your honey and celebrate. Because I'm sure it's a long day and it's going to continue to get longer, especially with your 6 a.m. Supreme Court decision tomorrow morning.
Well, I do want to thank you all for having me, but I also just want to say that I think shows like this are incredibly important. I think, I'm not sure who it was, but somebody I think touched on earlier the idea about our youth, and I guess what I'm left with and particularly struck by is, without trying to date myself too clearly, when I was, young lesbian, completely in the closet, scared, incredibly scared to have my family find out or anybody at school, and knowing that would probably subject me to, pretty terrible harassment. It was a really unfriendly place. I just couldn't have imagined that we would have a world like this and radio shows like this that people could tune into and listen to and get support and have a safe space. I think that's incredibly important. And as I look at today's decisions, I have to say it just makes me feel incredibly hopeful that more and more people, including our own youth, will understand that they're entitled to the same hopes and dreams as all of their heterosexual, their fellow friends and students and everybody in their community. And I think that validation is just critical, and it gives me hope.
Yes, and, as much as you're saying nice things about us and everything, it's right back at you, because with lawyers like you who if you're not willing to get in the trenches and fight for it, I don't think we would have come as far as fast as John was indicating.
Well, thanks so much. We certainly feel like it's an honor and a privilege to be the legal eagles for the LGBT community. We really appreciate it.
All right. Well, ladies and gentlemen, yes.
Let's have a shout out for Lambda. They have achieved more dollar per dollar than any other advocacy group in the United States. Thank you.
Maybe we could do a little T-shirt. Lambda Legal, you get your bang for your buck.
Lambda Legal, we got your back.
There you go.
Well, thank you all so much for your kind words, and thank you again for having me.
All right. Thank you, Tara.
Bye-bye.
She's so lovely. I just love her.
She's awesome.
She's about 5'0", but she's she's the type of person. And John, you're a lawyer, so know how what I'm referring to when I say this. She's about 5'0", and she looks like just all sweetness. But I'm sure in the courtroom you wouldn't want to be across from her.
Oh no, she's a pit bull.
Yeah. So all right. So what do we do in Arizona now going forward? Let's get a little local here.
John?
Yeah, I think we got to digest this opinion, but I think you're going to see challenges all over the country. People who, I think Tara pointed out, there's going to have to be implementation on how the federal benefits are going to be applied, because if the federal law says you only get the benefit if the marriage is legal in your state, well, if you're legally married in California, then that's now ripe for another challenge, all right? So say there's a benefit that you're entitled to under federal law in California, you're legally married, you come over here and suddenly the benefit stops. I think that's going to be challenge number one to the Supreme Court, to say, all right, how does that apply? And then, you're going to just see challenge after challenge along those veins.
So I was on Horizon tonight, and one of the comments was that the opposition is saying, well, the Supreme Court ruling of DOMA didn't give the thumbs up to same-sex marriage. And my reply to that was, yes, but it really didn't really give the thumbs down to same-sex marriage. So clearly we're going to have our side and the opponent side and all of their legal eagles, claiming victory for today, because, it wasn't a clear-cut decision. But more importantly, I think for us, is the decisions didn't hurt us.
No, I think it is restricted, It does not say clearly that marriage equality needs to be the law of the land. Mm-hmm. The opinion says, the last substantive line of the opinion says, by seeking to displace this protection, marriage, and treating those persons as living in marriages less respected than others, the federal statute is in violation of the Fifth Amendment. This opinion and its holding are confined to those lawful marriages. So Kennedy finishes by saying, hey, what I've said here only applies to people who are legally married in other states. So he really hammers the final line of his opinion home, saying, this is a states' rights issue in terms of this opinion. We're going to make sure that the federal government honors state marriages, but he's not saying that there's a federal right to marriage equality, which to me is obviously pretty disappointing. You look at, traditionally marriage has been a state right, but if you go back to the last time this came up with interracial marriage, Loving versus Virginia, the Supreme Court there, with a single stroke of the pen, Earl Warren, greatest Supreme Court justice ever, 9-0 opinion, strikes down all anti-interracial marriage laws in the United States. So clearly the Supreme Court has the power and has gone that far, but they're just not here right yet.
But at the time when Loving versus Virginia, 37 or 38 states had already done the same. So clearly the law of the land was moving there. And I think today, if we were sitting on 37 or 38 states that had already passed gay marriage, I think they would have potentially taken that leap. But with only 13 freedom states now, if you throw California back in,
I love that, Rebecca. 13 freedom states.
yeah, that's what I'm calling them.
That's right.
The 13 freedom states. Maybe I should go get it trademarked before somebody else rips it off.
Well, I mean, speaking as a local activist, I'm not a lawyer. I'm not keenly aware of all of the local minutia for law. But I mean, you asked the question like, what's the way forward for our state? And I mean, I think this speaks powerfully to local empowerment, specifically here in Arizona. And I mean, as Amanda was saying earlier in the show, there's a movement in Kentucky, and we have a movement here where we are working to coalesce and galvanize all of these different groups, whether it's African American, Latino, LGBT, labor, all of these different groups, and bringing them to the table and saying, how can we unite under things that are important to all of us and move our state forward? So this can be a catalyst to propel that movement forward, which will better the future of the state, not only in regard to marriage equality, but to a whole host of things.
Yeah, and one of the immediate things we can do is take people like Sal DeCiccio, who say, it's a bathroom bill, and John Kavanaugh, who, no loo for you. Yeah. And I forgot who was the one who put forward the expansion of the Restoration Freedom Act. But they need to go. They need to go, and they need to go now. So I can't believe it. We have another caller. We're from Japan. Hello, caller. Do we have a name?
This is Lawrence Robinson.
Lawrence
Hello,
Robinson of South
Lawrence.
Phoenix, District 8.
Yes, and actual perpetual listener of the agenda and big fan of yours and Kathy Young. And I have to say, Grant Miller as well. It's very hard to follow him on air.
Oh, goodness.
So
listen, what a great day we've had.
Yes, and as a gay man, as somebody who is running for the City Phoenix Council, and as someone who believes in diversity, not just in the LGBTQ community, but all across the way, and as a law professor, I mean, good God, you cover it all here. What'd you think about today?
Very excited. I mean, it was the shot in the arm that I needed after yesterday's decision at the Supreme Court, of course, striking down part of the Voter Rights Act. And really what it reminds me is you can take 2 steps forward today, but we have to remember the 1 step back we took yesterday. And really to Grant's point, which I meant it when I said it's hard to follow Grant, it's really trying to combine the effort among our LGBT and queer community with the other movements that are also happening across the country. I think, you really have to look at this as an opportunity to create a coalition and really try to unite people together around the fact that everyone deserves equality in your marriages, in your living situations, in your schools, and in your neighborhoods. So I'm happy with the decision today, but I'm also certainly cautious because we have so much more work to do.
And the one thing that I saw, and this is coming from somebody who's not a lawyer, but I like to think that I play one on TV.
You do.
Because my partner's a lawyer, so that's where I take credit for it. When you look at Fisher, which was Fisher versus Texas, which was the kind of the affirmative action in the university, then you look at the Shelby decision, and then DOMA and Prop 8 today, what resonated with me on all 4 of those decisions is they gutted federal authority. They put it all back onto the states. And that to me was just like a huge, I don't know if it's a screw you to the administration and the Congress, or if it's we feel like now government's gotten too big and we need to regulate it back to the states, or what. But it seemed like those decisions, that was the one thing, the one commonality among them all.
Well, I mean, that's what you would expect from a more conservative ruling in a conservative court, yes?
It would, but but considering,
and it is, and
go ahead.
Look at how excited all of us are. No, I was just going to say, it really, what happens and what the right wing is very consistent upon is trying to follow through with their original intentions. And under the Reagan administration, they fought for quote-unquote states' rights, which at the time the ideology was trying to allow for discrimination to occur on a statewide level, and to prevent and blunt the protections that we had seen on the federal level through the Supreme Court decisions of earlier courts. So really the move for states' rights was in reaction to the federal civil rights protections that had been put in place by the Supreme Court. So really the opportunity here is to organize on the statewide level and counteract their ideology that they think will prevent rights from occurring. You were just talking about the majority of the states still do not allow freedom. They're not freedom states, as you said, Rebecca. But, if we fight now and use this opportunity, we can certainly move beyond that and create a full 50-state union where all unions are recognized.
And after the Fisher ruling, I just quit trying to handicap the Supreme Court because Kagan removed herself.
Recuses herself from everything.
Yeah, she recused herself because she was a Solicitor General involved in it. She has ethics. She recuses herself, unlike Clarence Thomas. But anyway, and after the oral arguments, I swore that court was divided 4-4, and they came down 7-1. And then today, especially in the Prop 8, was Sotomayor being on the dissenting side. Yeah. It's like, good God. I mean, I know that they never come out and say why they voted the way they did, but you want to know why they voted the way they did today.
Yeah, it's an interesting time to be alive, and the coalitions really are there to be formed. I mean, if you look at the libertarian strain within our own state of Arizona, we've got the opportunity to say, we can put together folks who may not be Democrats, they may not be Republicans, but they're people who don't believe that government should restrict our rights. So if we start with that libertarian base, combine them with the progressives who believe in LGBT rights, and then, obviously work to educate and mobilize a whole section of the community that has never voted or never cared to vote, then we, in a blink of an eye, will have a majority in the state, which is kind of exciting.
Yeah, and on one of my interviews today, I was trying to explain, and I'm not sure I did it very well, but that gay marriage in this state in particular is more than just, 2 men or 2 women giving a marriage license. We have, this state's branding is horrible. We have SB 1070. We have a governor who wags her finger at the president. We have the bathroom bills. We have the, having to show your birth certificate in order to pee in public. We have...
well, hopefully not peeing in public.
Yeah, well, okay, peeing in a public bathroom. Is that good? Okay, so I'll stop peeing behind the bush. God damn it. We have the attempted suppression of voter rights. This is a state that is looked upon as intolerable, and we don't want you. So... in order, and survey after survey after survey shows that the best and the brightest talent and workers, diversity means a hell of a lot to them. And we are in a budget crisis here. And businesses are not going to come here if they think we're intolerant and we don't want people. And by God, we don't accept anybody who's not white and Republican and a little bit loony. So,
and that's absolutely correct. And I was really proud when our now mayor, Greg Stanton, asked me to revise the anti-discrimination ordinances to update them to fully protect our LGBT and disabled populations. But, the work still, it has to be done. Grant, for one, Grant Miller organized all of the marches, which were great. But, we need more people who continue to fight for all of these other issues because, in this day and age, in this state, nothing is guaranteed. We've got an Arpaio and a Brewer, but who's next? And we need to make sure that at the next election, we're reelecting either a city council member or a governor or an attorney general, that we have the votes and we've got the actual boots on the ground to make sure that we say enough is enough and we can actually move forward past this bigotry.
Well, and to be a little bit of a devil's advocate for you, Lawrence, what does that look like? I think it's easy to talk in these big pictures of we need a movement, we need boots on the ground, but for you specifically, what is one concrete way that we can take that really fantastic notion and actually apply it in states that do not have full equality for all of its citizens?
I think it's the most simple, basic building block. We've got all of these great tools. We've got now these radio shows, and we've got the Facebook postings that we can do every day, and we've got all of these tools at our disposal. But the one we can't forget is making sure that we actually get people who are like-minded, who believe in equality, out to vote. And that is not easy. It requires you to either involve yourself in an organization or a political campaign, and to really actually just do the very basic numerical math. You've got to make sure that there are more people voting who care about equality like we do than there are who care about their bigotry and the status quo. And that really is just a numbers game. It's just adding up to 50% plus one. And so I would say you can't wait until we run a Fred Duvall or a Chad Campbell or a Felicia Rodolini next year. You need to get out today. You need to get out this weekend. You need to get out all of this year to make sure we register more Democrats, more young people, more Latinos, more LGBT people, so that the majority that really is here in this state is actually up and counted at the ballot box.
Absolutely. And I mean, I think part of it is to take those people who are apathetic, like nothing's going to change, and get them to get them involved and get them to vote, because it's just, I think that's what frustrates me the most, is when people say, I don't vote because it's not going to make a difference. It's like, it will.
It can make a huge difference.
It can make a huge difference. And, and we talk about our wonderful mayor, and he posted a great statement. I won't read it all, but I love the last line from Mayor Greg Stanton today, from Phoenix. Arizona must now live up to our values of freedom and individualism by being a leader and proactively repealing our discriminatory laws instead of being dragged along reluctantly. That's a pretty bold statement.
That's great.
God love him. So, all right. You mentioned the voter rights, and some people I know I talked to, they were like, voter rights, that won't affect us. And I was like, okay, well, imagine this: what happens if redistricting lines in San Francisco basically cookie cuttered the Castro district into like 3 or 4 segments, and the LGBT bloc couldn't vote anybody in anymore? And they were like, oh. I mean, how?
No, exactly. And
I mean, do we?
And that makes a difference.
Do we expect to see some, I don't want to say Republican retribution, because, I always feel like it's Republican against Democrats, and if we really want to change things, we need to get over that. But do we expect to see some people try to take advantage of that with that Shelby ruling and really start to basically put minorities down again when it comes to voting blocks?
I think so. I think it opens the door not just for communities of color, but when you look at even the city of Phoenix redistricting, we were talking about communities of interest, which allow us to group any type of community of interest that bluntly can define what that interest is itself and show up and actually organize and say we are a community of interest. So I think that when you open the floodgate for the racial dynamic and dilution of votes, you open that up for every other group and identity sector. And, Phoenix, for all of the great things that we have, our great mayor, we do have an openly gay person on council. In a blink of an eye, that could be gone. And the easiest way for that to happen would be for the Sal DeCicios of the world and for all of the ideological Tea Party types to, frankly move into our cities and to take over really our liberal bastions, which are our cities, like they have our school boards and all of the other sort of entities within government. So yeah. I really would keep a very keen eye on what's going on in the cities. I mean, Councilman Tom Simplot here in Phoenix talks about the fact that he really made a difference, and I believe this from everything I know. He made a difference in convincing his colleagues that the equality, the anti-discrimination ordinance, was the thing to pass. But behind closed doors, it was only his personal relationship that helped pass it. And so you've got to keep people who are LGBT elected. And if they start trying to take our power and dilute it down in the neighborhoods where we have it, whether it be in Central Phoenix or Castro in San Francisco, then, in a generation we may not have elected LGBT leadership. And that's one thing we're facing here in our race for city council. I'm running in South Phoenix, but the fact is that we really don't have a very strong shot other than this district to keep an LGBT person on the council. Yeah. And, no matter what homophobic attacks I face, the reality is that we just need more boots out there of LGBT people and people who believe in progressive policy and moving forward to join us and say, yes, we do want diversity on this council, and we want someone who's going to uphold all of our equality.
Yeah, and then one more point on the voting rights conversation. I mean, Kennedy's opinion for this DOMA case, he stated in no uncertain terms that, and I quote, that DOMA seeks to injure the very class New York seeks to protect. And I mean, how ironic is it then that we can see a nearly mirror argument being made against voting rights and access? So one could turn that statement upside down, and it would easily read, the state seeks to injure the very class our government and legislation seeks to continue to protect. So, I mean, like building off of what you said, it is about having a movement that can fight outside of the bounds of the court and the legislature, if need be, to protect those rights of all of our citizens, regardless of race, ethnicity, sexual orientation. And that's the kind of movement that I think that you're talking about here. Hello? Did we lose you?
Did we lose Lawrence?
I would assume that he would probably say yes, absolutely.
You stunned him into silence,
he
Grant.
would probably say, once again,
Sorry,
Grant.
my phone went into a dead zone.
Lawrence, what happened to you
No,
there?
I'm still here. I was saying amen, Grant.
Okay, all right.
I'm totally with you.
Oh, so yeah, it's going to be an interesting fight, and I absolutely agree. But I still go back to the fact, if we mobilize everybody in this state who's been screwed and get them to the polls, we can take over this state. So,
Absolutely.
hint, hint. Oh, wonderful. So, any last things, Councilman candidate Robinson? How's your how's your campaign going?
The campaign is going well. I was listening to your show in the background while I did work here in our downtown office, and things are going very well. What I love about this race is that for our campaign, we've really mobilized those different groups, as you would say, that have been screwed. Whether it's folks who want good schools for their kids, or the LGBT community, or those who are undocumented but still want to be involved here in their neighborhoods where they grew up and live. So we really do have a great coalition, and I've never seen anything like it in a political campaign in Phoenix. So, I would just tell anybody listening to go to robinsonforphoenix.com and sign up to either volunteer or donate, or find us on Facebook at Robinson for Phoenix, and really kind of learn what all the buzz is about. It's going really well, Rebecca.
Awesome. It's kind of funny. We talk about doing what's right. For those of you who don't live here in Phoenix, the Arizona Republic has a couple of columnists who always go off after politicians, and E.J. Montini and Lori Roberts. And Lori Roberts' latest is kind of directed at what I would say is the LGBT opposition here in Center for Arizona Policy, and their is she executive director, Kathy Herod? I'm not quite sure if she's president. She's not president. I don't know if she was executive director, but she kind of runs the organization. And I'm just going to read two sentences here. Lori says, "I just don't see how dictating which consenting adults can and cannot partake in the benefits of marriage is government staying out of family life. Isn't that actually government butting in?" And then her last two paragraphs are, "Here's a suggestion. This week, the Ann E. Casey Foundation's Kids Count report came out, showing that 1 out of 4 Arizona children live in poverty, that most don't have access to preschool, and that 3/4 of 4th graders can't read at an acceptable level. Arizona ranks as 47th best state to be a child. Surely that is an issue of morality that we would all work to fix."
And, I mean, to be clear, we just slipped down to 47th place. We were 46th, and now we have slipped yet again to a lower ranking here.
I am an Arizona native. I will tell you that my 46 and a half years that I have been alive, except when I went off to college, I have lived in this state. I never recall a poll where Arizona wasn't ranked in the 40s when it came to child, how it was to be a child, education, and mental health. And after 46 years, don't you think somebody would be embarrassed to get that changed? But clearly not. I mean, clearly we're doing fine, So,
there's a direct correlation by the state of our public education system and the amount of ignorance and intolerance that we allow in our state. And so the fact is that if you continue to defund public education, you're going to basically be allowing the status quo of intolerance to exist. And really, our schools should be places where people think outside of the box and where they learn to get along with kids who are different from them. and they get a sense to learn to expand their mind. And if we continue to not fund public education here, we're going to have a direct output of producing citizens who really don't understand the world around them. So, I mean, you've really got to understand how these issues all correlate, and they all intersect. So we've got to fight as an LGBT community for good schools and for education, for our undocumented neighbors, and for women's rights, and all of these other issues that really, frankly, affect us all.
Amen. That's all I can say. Amen, brother.
Amen. Right back at you.
Amen, Lawrence.
Yeah, well, it's 8:46, and I think that means you still have 14 minutes that you can do donor calls to get money, right? You can call up to 9.
Thank you. Well, thank you for having me on. I appreciate it.
You can call up till 9 o'clock at night. I love the fact that you called in. You've kind of been almost our second legal guest of the night, but I don't want to take you away from your current job of getting elected. So.
All right. Well, thanks for your help. Thanks for all you do in the program, and thanks to your guest host Grant as well, who's really been stepping up. He's one of the emerging leaders out here in the community to join you, Rebecca, and Kathy. And so thank you all, and I look forward to talking to you soon.
Sounds great. Thanks Lawrence.
All right. Bye-bye.
Okay, I just have to pause here before we take our next caller, because we have been on the show not quite a year. I mean, we're 9 months. I don't know. We have to check and see when our first thing is and when our year anniversary is. But I think in all that time, we've had maybe one call, and it's when I was on vacation in South Carolina, and I had to call in and talk about all the Republican signs I was seeing because it was the middle of the election, and all I saw were Mitt Romney signs. I could not find an Obama sign. So that was our, third call of the night, and we now have number 4. Maybe we need to do promos on Randall White's show more often. Hello, caller. Do we have a name? Did they drop off?
Ricky. Yeah, it's Ricky in Memphis, Tennessee. How are you guys doing?
Good, Ricky. Oh, I'm sorry. Where did you say you were calling from?
Memphis, Tennessee.
Memphis. Wow, we had a Kentucky, and now we have a Tennessee.
Yeah, representing the South. I just wanted to call you guys and tell you how impressed I am with Arizona and what you do. I follow you on Facebook because I know Grant, and so I keep up with you quite a bit, and I just really like what you guys are doing there. And I wanted to echo what John said earlier when the caller called and was a little, down about, the progress we were making. And just seeing this happen today, I mean, this is something, I'm 51 years old. This is something that I really did not believe I would see happen. I didn't believe it, in my lifetime. So the progress we have made in the past few years is it's crazy. It's beautiful. And it also makes me think of right now is these wins that we have today. We have a team here, our NBA team is the Grizzlies here in Memphis. And whenever they lose, those crowds are small. But when they win, the crowds are huge. And right now, what that means to me is this is really the time for us to get people out while, people are really feeling positive about this. So that's really all I had to say.
Love it.
Echoing the question I asked Amanda earlier in the show, what has the response been in Memphis and in that part of the country? We've had response here in California, Arizona, Kentucky, and now down south on the border of Tennessee and Mississippi.
Well, when I heard you ask that question earlier, I thought about it. And I've been in school all day and work, but my Facebook has been pretty active among part of my friends and really quiet among another.
It has been quiet, hasn't it?
It's been really quiet. But quiet can be good, But, we organized today at our GLTV Center, and it was a big crowd there, a really, wonderful celebration there. But other than that, that's all I've really seen.
Yeah, I was...
Anyway.
It's kind of funny the way you talk about Facebook, because I went to school. I was raised Wisconsin Synod Lutheran, and if you know anything about the Lutheran hierarchy, Wisconsin Synod is like the strictest. And I went to Lutheran grade school, Lutheran high school, and on my Facebook I am friends with a few people from high school, and clearly some of them still drink the Lutheran Kool-Aid because. And me being president of Equality Arizona, and I'm like, yeah. Some of them are like, how many times are they going to redefine marriage? Is polygamy next? And I'm like, screw you. There's a couple that I'm actually close to unfriending because it's like, I respect the fact that you have your beliefs, but, you're wrong. So.
Yeah, I do the same thing.
Now,
I'm close to pushing that button a lot of times.
Now we have I would say we have pockets of Arizona that are highly religious. I mean, overall as a state, I don't feel like, you walk into downtown Phoenix and suddenly the shadow of God comes over you. But down there in Tennessee, I mean, it's quite strongly Baptist. Is that correct?
Yeah, Southern Baptist, very strong. And there aren't pockets. I mean, there are pockets of more liberal people. I'm a good Christian, and I'm a congregationalist, but those congregations are pretty few and far between down here. But the ones that are here are beautiful and wonderful. But we have a ways to go.
Yeah, we do. But I mean, I think everybody's today just energized our community so much more. So thanks for calling and stay in the fight.
All right, thanks, guys.
Thank you, Ricky.
Thanks, Ricky.
Thanks, Ricky.
This is like a record. Another one.
Do we have another?
We have another caller. Who do we have?
Actually, they fell off the line.
They fell off the line?
They fell off, yeah.
Do we know who it was?
No.
No? Okay, call.
It was like area code 440 or something like that. I don't know.
All right, caller 440 area code that fell off the line. Call on back. Joe won't hang up on you.
No, I didn't hang up. Can I chime in for a second? I love because I was listening this morning because I was here when we started our coverage from our, I can say this now, from our Pacific Time Bureau, from our California bureau,
our West Coast affiliate. Yes.
Yeah, exactly. And 3 years ago, when I had the crazy idea of converting my personal podcast into a larger entity, and it wasn't a multi-show network like it is today, and seeing it, I commented on this on Facebook. And I guess if I push the right buttons, I can actually get myself live here. Here we go. Anyways, when I started this, I didn't think, I actually thought, well, maybe we'll do election night coverage or whatnot, and Clayton's show wound up doing that. But for this event, which we finally saw coming to fruition in obviously the past couple weeks because we knew it was going to happen in June, we just didn't know when. And then we start seeing all these kind of gears start to work, and my mind starts going, I'm like, this is going to be massive. And massive is in relative terms because we're still new and we're not MSNBC, although we would love to be. But anyways, it was really amazing to just see all the people tuning in and to see all these things working and the announcements coming down the way we wanted them, or it could have been worse, obviously. And for me, it's just humbling to say, wow, this has worked. You guys have record amount of phone calls tonight, and I just want to also personally give a gigantic shout out and thank you to Randall White at Equality Radio, who joined us in May and called us out of the blue in March, or I think it was April, and said, we want to join forces with you guys. You guys seem to be where it is, and he runs Eat, Drink, Explore Media out of there. He's been he was one of the first openly gay journalists and broadcasters, and he never got to have his own sort of radio show about gay issues, and so he jumped at the opportunity to come on to Q Talk, and he produces the show out of his existing studio out there and links up with us electronically, and this is what we're hoping to do more of in terms of getting people who are already doing shows and whatnot, and to continue to join the network. So today was really amazing in the fact, we're able to extend this coverage out until the people stop calling. But, I know this, this is pretty amazing. And Bill couldn't make it, this is, Bill couldn't make it tonight, so I'm still the fall guy who has to come in and run things when our our various people can't come in. But this is just amazing, and it is truly an historic day. I mentioned on his program this morning that I said, as a single gay person, this gives me hope that yes, when I do find a partner and want to tie the knot, that yes, it's going to be recognized. I mean, maybe I have to go to another state temporarily to get that done and then come back, or maybe I'll just move. I don't know, but hey, at least we got progress, and it's another great step forward.
Yeah, we were having dinner with a friend last night and talking about taking over Canada. So it's nice to know that the rulings today, we don't have to move forward with that. So, yeah. And so what you're saying is Randall could have been Rachel Maddow if he'd stayed into it, you know.
Well,
you know,
there you go.
It could be the Randall White show on MSNBC rather than Rachel Maddow.
You never know. You just never know.
I had the privilege of being on his show for about 10 minutes this morning, and it was just a blast. I mean,
and it was funny because you opened the same thing. You opened the same way on his show that you did with the comments about like Arizona's branding sucks, you know, and it does.
It does.
I really have told people. I've said, you know, with the SB 1070 and all this other stuff, it's just a lightning rod state, and that's why. You know, you just, you know, in general, I mean, I could go off on a lot of tangents, but, you know, there are a number of things beyond just the LGBT issues that are kind of backwards here. And it's because I don't think we can't attract the amazing minds and so forth to the state that we should be attracting and to balance out, you know, all the other states that attract these amazing minds. But somehow we managed to start a gay talk media network.
I know, I love it.
Right in Arizona. So I think that's just there.
Very cool.
I don't know.
I know. Hello.
Yeah.
It's like, wow.
Hey, for all of the Brewers and Kavanaughs and craziness we're dealing with, it's a pretty good state.
It is.
You know, this is not the Bible Belt. It's a libertarian state. People forget that, and the future is ours.
Yeah, and I was chuckling today.
Grant and Lawrence's. I'm not sure.
Exactly. I haven't moved out yet, so I'm still the second generation Arizonan. So you know, hey.
Before you get another caller, do you want to play that video?
Yeah. So yeah, we had some other some videos that we loaded because clearly, once the SCOTUS decisions came down, SCOTUS. Hello, it's been a long day. I know. Thank you. After the Supreme Court decisions came down, you know, everybody had to have their 15 minutes of fame, and of course, my favorite was Michelle Bachmann.
Oh, and this is really great.
So, with today's technology, Joe's going to pull that up.
We're going to play that up. Just hang on one second.
I haven't seen it. What is it?
Oh, you haven't?
No. Is it good?
Are you
Is
in
it
for
good?
a treat? Crazy is?
These decisions are offensive on so many levels, but primarily because we are a nation of laws, not men. We're a nation that exists under the concept of limited government. What the Supreme Court ruled today was on the basis of equal protection. And yet, in one of the greatest ironies in this decision, they denied equal protection to every American in the United States. How did they do that? Because they undercut the people's representatives when they voted on the Defense of Marriage Act in the first place. This is historic, because you see what the Supreme Court is saying is they're asserting the supremacy of the court over all three branches of government. They attack something that they have no jurisdiction over whatsoever, the foundational unit of our society, which is marriage. That is something that God created. That is something that God will define. The Supreme Court, though they may think so, have not yet arisen to the level of God. And so we are here today standing foursquare in support of our Constitution and for the institution of marriage.
Did she say Foursquare? Was she meaning she was going to check in somewhere?
Well, and
behind the pulpit.
And the other thing, and correct me if I'm wrong, because I could be. It's been a long time since my civics class. But she said the Supreme Court basically overrode the three branches of government. Isn't the Supreme Court one of the branches of the government?
Yes.
Isn't it legislative, executive, and judicial?
Exactly.
I mean, it's like...
What's interesting is I heard... most of the conservative people that I know stayed very, very quiet today, which I found to be a welcome reprieve from the bully pulpit mentality of the recent past. But that was the mentality I heard from people who were bold enough to speak, was that the Supreme Court has taken the place of the Supreme Court of Heaven in
with Diana Ross in the Supremes.
re-engineering society on such a fundamental level. It is doom and gloom and Armageddon, basically.
And because DOMA was voted on by the people. Really? I thought it was voted on by Congress, and, that can be changed. Congress has the right to change their mind. Yeah.
And the Supreme Court decides whether it's constitutional or not.
No, God
and
does.
It's funny that all the founding fathers thought about a separation of church and state, and they thought that was the way to build a nation, was to separate religious wackadoos from power. She doesn't seem to get that.
I mean, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
I was going to say, I think that this feeds into the larger conversation we've been having today, that while we can celebrate this step, this baby step, this leap forward, however we want to quantify this, that there is still so much work to be done within the legislature when the Senate will not boldly take up the cause of same-sex families who are affected by immigration issues, who will kick the can down the road on voting rights issues. I mean, this signals that there has been a breakdown in our government in terms of taking responsibility for making sure that we are creating a future that is welcoming for all people who live within our borders.
Well, and if you looked at the national polls, a majority of Americans did not favor interracial marriage until 1986. So if we had allowed...
My grandfather still does not.
For real?
Absolutely. He told me, he said, I will not marry a black man and a white woman. It's just something I believe. It doesn't make me racist.
Right. He's got
so
lots of black
that
friends.
is still a very real mentality.
Wow.
So we still fight.
Wow.
That stunned us into speechlessness.
Indeed.
So,
as it should.
So Tupper says, and I just looked it up, that there actually is a Foursquare church. And they're crazy.
That would deserve...
Yes. I mean, they believe, a family of 1,800 churches that exist to glorify God and advance his kingdom. Wow. Tupper, you know too much, my friend. That's kind of squarey. So, yes, squarey. So somebody, played this for Nancy and tried to get Nancy Pelosi to watch it and said, well, Michelle Bachmann and Nancy fired off. Who cares? Yes, gotta love it. So then, of course, our good friend, who took Randall White's place. That's what I'm gonna now call Rachel Maddow. She took Randall White's place because he just didn't get there. Got on the show with Barney Frank, our favorite senator from Massachusetts. So play that up for you too, because you always know that Barney Frank's got something interesting to say.
Put in a plug here for Mary Bernardo, the third marshal of the LGBT movement. It was her legal strategy, and she's done this work. And, I wish we could push a button and get all our rights tomorrow. That's never been the way it's worked in America in the face of prejudice. You have to work hard politically and legally and socially and intellectually. And this is a major breakthrough. It isn't everything, but it is a good indication that everything is not too far away, because it is a further validation of the sentiment. And one good thing leads to another. You will now have, because I think the Prop 8 case will be, as you said, about 100 million Americans will have the right to same-sex marriage, as I counted up quickly in my head. And once more, that's a big reality that will defeat prejudice, and this movement's going to go forward. We're not all the way there yet, but this is a major step towards it.
Congressman Barney Frank, our thanks to you for coming on.
So, Barney's, and I agree, it's a good step forward. It's not where we want to be. It's not full civil rights, and I question piecemealing like we're having to do. But, it's better than nothing, what we saw today.
It's a great leap forward. As a lawyer, I understand the law is built on incremental steps. Very rarely do you see these great leaps forward, and this is a great leap forward. So I think it's a great, unequivocal day of victory.
Do you think there's a difference between whether we achieve the equality at the ballot box or whether we achieve it through the courts? I mean, my fear today, and I was very glad to see that the Supreme Court struck down DOMA, because they could have said something about standing as well. And part of me kind of went, I forgot to ask Tara that, is they could have used the same argument in DOMA that they used in Prop 8, because Victoria Jackson, the constitutional attorney that teaches at Harvard, did submit a brief saying the blog, the Bipartisan Legal Advisory Group that challenged that, didn't have any standing.
Mm-hmm.
But had they done that, had they said, oh, you don't have any standing, then, if there was a chance that we got a Republican president in 2016 with a Republican AG, they could have said at that point, "Oh, hey, we're going to support this now,
Right.
and make it the law of the land," and then it just would have been going back and forth. So, I was glad to see a ruling come out for DOMA, or come out against DOMA today. But do you think there's a difference?
I think there absolutely is a difference. I think that the inaction we've seen on the congressional level, like I said, again, tying it back to the recent immigration discussions, for them not to be inclusive of same-sex families, LGBT individuals within that legislation, proves that if we put our hope in the courts, then the courts are going to be constantly dealing with cases that deal with discrimination and unfair biases towards one group or another. And the only way to change the legislation that's being put forward, that's being challenged in the courts, is to change the people that are making the legislation. That starts locally. That starts on the city level, like we were talking about with Lawrence earlier tonight. That starts with flipping our state legislatures and then moving into Congress and higher offices, governor's races. But I think it is a two-prong approach where court rulings are very significant. It sets precedent within the American system of law that can be built on for the future. But we can't place our hope solely in the courts, because we will always be fighting people who are like Michelle Bachmann and others in office.
I agree. I think it's got to be both. I think the Supreme Court, as you said, Rebecca, 38 states had passed or had abolished anti-miscegenation laws saying it was illegal to marry somebody of another race before the Supreme Court took the plunge. But I would like ideally to see us get it at the ballot box in all 50 states. But the reality is there are going to be places like Mississippi where, my Lord, be 200 years probably.
They just abolished slavery a couple months ago.
They were also one of the states that just recently abolished the sodomy laws. So,
oh, jeez.
I mean, within the last 10 years, Mississippi would have put me in jail for being gay.
You don't want to go to jail, do you?
Not in Mississippi.
No, not in Mississippi.
Get on that work chain, gang. I chuckled today because Kathy Herod was on a couple of interviews in Skype. and she kept talking about that today was a victory because, it returned us to states' rights and it's the will of the voters. Excuse me. And I just thought, okay, yes, the will of the voters in 2008 was to define marriage as a man and a woman. But 2 years earlier, the will of the voters was not to define it. And then you changed your message 2 years later and kind of scared the bejeebers out of people. Mm-hmm. So what happens if in 2013, 14, 15, or 16, the will of the voters is to get rid of it? I just laugh because whenever somebody uses that, it's the will of the voters. It's the will of the people. They make it sound like 90, 95, 96% of the state, that's what they believe. And the fact was that they only won it, with 52% of the vote. So.
And that was several years ago. What year was that? 08?
08.
Yeah. Well, where in the Constitution does it say you're allowed to put other people's civil rights to a vote? The whole thing is obscene, and it's always been obscene. We could target lots of groups that society at one point or another felt socially unacceptable and put their civil rights to a vote. And it would be wrong doing it to them just as it's wrong doing it to us. I don't see that the momentum is going to change. People see that. Guys like you, Rebecca, with Equality Arizona and Grant and Lawrence are fighting that and moving that line forward every day, right?
We try.
Little by little.
Yeah.
Erase the line, move it up.
Yeah. Move that thin line.
Do we think, and I want to take off my Equality Arizona hat here and just kind of talk as a gay woman living in Arizona. Do we think this state is ready for a 2014 ballot?
I think that for a ballot initiative to be successful, there needs to be a broad coalition. There needs to be solid groundwork and research done to make sure that we are servicing the citizens of the state fairly, that we are representing the issue boldly, absolutely, but in a way where we can ensure that it will be successful. Mm-hmm. to just put forward a ballot initiative on any topic that you find compelling, that's not responsible. The responsible thing is to make sure that people who have a stake in the issue have a seat at the table when decisions are being made, and can help push that forward. So within the next year, I think that there's still a lot of coalition building that can be done here. I think that we've done a lot in this state, and specifically in Phoenix, to strengthen those ties between different organizations in the LGBTQ community. But I think that we're really just getting started in uncovering our potential.
Yeah, I agree with that. Today, equal rights. Tomorrow, who knows? What do you think, Joe? Do you think the state's ready to pass gay marriage in 2014?
Let's go for it. I was reading. I was pushing buttons, so I wasn't paying complete attention to the conversation. But I know I was reading an article on AZ Central about the movement that is trying to get it on the ballot, and they're starting to get their signatures. I mean, sometimes you just have to go for it. And I mean, the worst thing that can happen is that it doesn't get enough signatures or it's not voted on. When you're working towards something, if you don't always get all the way there, you at least made some progress and you try again. And while I personally don't want for us, for anybody to keep waiting for equality, and I wish that perhaps there is something that could happen on the federal level. I don't know, because that's probably why the Supreme Court issued things the way they did, because they just didn't want to go that boldly. But the caller who mentioned earlier, caller number 500 or whatever it was, because we had so many tonight, that these issues shouldn't even be here in the 21st century, and that other countries have tackled this. I am of the philosophy of, and call me a little bit naive, or not naive, but call me a little bit living in fantasy land, sort of the future, the perfect future that we should be aiming for is the sort of science fiction Star Trek future, where a lot of things have been fixed. But at the end of the day, eventually humanity decides that we're over fighting one another. We're over prejudice. We're over all of these things. And so I agree with the caller that these things need to be gone. I mean, this is the 21st century. It is not 1885 anymore. But the challenge is, and this is where communications, and this is part of the reason I started this whole thing, is because I think that communications and the internet are sort of the world's savior, so to speak, and they constantly make the world a smaller place. They constantly bring people together. And it's those small connections that can take care of these issues. The gay prejudice, if you want to call it, I think is one of the last major prejudices that we are crossing as, oh, look, there's another phone call, that we're, I just see it on the screen right in front of me. This is one of the last major prejudices that at least we're crossing. We know that there's plenty of other issues in other countries, that are, and you have this disparity between other countries, and you have a disparity across the entire planet, and that's simply because of all the different geopolitical cultures, and we could go into that for hours. But until you really can bring humanity together, even potentially under what many people don't like to have the idea of some sort of one world government at some point in the future, I think those things are going to happen, because otherwise you're going to always have these different rules and these different laws and different protections. And at the end of the day, that you're just not going to have a nice unified planet. And again, here's the fantasy world. Aliens are not going to visit us until we have a world-based platform. But anyways,
a point that I would make in what you said is that I'm frankly frustrated and approaching angry that we have to continue to have these conversations in a country that brands itself as a beacon of hope to the rest of the world.
That's right.
If we are framing ourselves as the country that has itself together and that is this wonderful example for developing countries, then these are not conversations that we should be continuing to have in 2013.
That's right.
I mean, going back to the bit about local initiatives, I think that it is important to, like you said, go ahead and do them. But at the same time, I worry that if it is not successful, then there will be the message crafted by Kathy Herod and others from the conservative bloc that say, aha, see, Arizona is not ready for this. They jumped the gun again, and this just goes to show that Arizona is a truly conservative state. I mean, it's I think a lot of what we do with these initiatives and making sure that we're pushing this state forward into a more progressive future, which is inevitable. It's going to happen. Is that we're doing it in such a way where we can ensure that the messaging is consistent and that our drives towards that future are consistent as well, and that maintain integrity.
And I agree, and because I try to come up with simple solutions to complex problems, but in a sense, and they probably just are unconvincible, but sometimes I look at the Kathy Herods and all the other people who are, some article was out today with all like the 13 evil people against LGBT rights or something like that. And, you sometimes wonder, how many gay friends do they really have? Probably zero. But are there ways of getting at them? Because they are unfortunately the gate holders, sort of the key holders to these organizations. And you can, you had an organization that shut itself down voluntarily recently, which was Exodus International, which that's kind of what I call a false flag. They claim to shut themselves down, but I've also heard that they just shut themselves down and changed their name to go do something different.
Well,
but the same. So
to clarify what Exodus is going to be doing, and my family wanted me to go to reparative therapy.
So did mine. So like 3 days after I came out, it was like, you can do that. Well, they gave me the choice of I could talk to one of those people on the phone or go see the local parish priest. So I talked to them on the phone.
Right. But what Exodus is doing is they are rebranding and joining the celibacy as the only course of action. It's okay to be gay. You just can't act on it. A la Book of Mormon, the Broadway show, and this pop culture notion of being gay is okay just as long as you don't act upon it.
Yeah, that whole thing is just not,
it doesn't. Well, the secret is that doesn't work.
It doesn't. It just doesn't. Shall we go to the caller?
Yes.
Caller, last 4 digits 9197. You are on with the crew from The Agenda.
Hello.
Hi, everyone. Andrew, I've been listening to the conversation as I eat my dinner here in Phoenix. And the thing that I wanted to kind of ask and get your opinion on was thinking about the Prop 8 case and how the justices didn't rule on the merits of the case. They vacated the circuit decision and remanded it down to the lower court. Is there another case kind of coming up, or what would be the next case that would make it up to the Supreme Court level that could be judged on its merits?
Wow. I think Tara touched on it earlier. There are 2 cases working their way up, or sitting in the Ninth Circuit Court right now. One's out of Hawaii, and the other one's out of Nevada, and they do have to do specifically, I believe, with gay marriage.
Yes.
And I could foresee a discrimination case if, say, like Arizona says, oh, hey, John and Susie, you were married in New York and we accept you as married, but, John and Stan, you were married in New York and we don't accept you. I mean, that's just blatant gender discrimination in a way. So, who knows where it's going to come from? I mean, this equal protection clause that Kennedy kind of left open today could really just blow the water as far as lawsuits go, and using that as an issue. So.
I think best case scenario, you see a direct challenge. Somebody gets married tomorrow or tries to get married in Alabama or Mississippi or Arizona, and they're denied that right, and then they file a suit, in federal court. Then you'd have a direct line of appeal, ultimately to the U.S. Supreme Court. But it's critical, as we've all said, we've got to keep the 5 votes we have on the Supreme Court. We've got to reelect a Democratic president. If Ruth Ginsburg were to die after Obama left office, we lose. If Kennedy leaves after Obama and it's a Republican, we lose. So as Grant and Rebecca point out, we've got to keep those votes there until that case gets up there.
I mean, the scenario that you just pointed out, someone in the South or in Arizona getting married and having a direct channel, would that say that? I mean, could that case say that there is a constitutional right, or could that case? I mean, the federal government has already established, I guess, today that they can't discriminate on kind of what's on federalism grounds, or is it on equal protection?
There's equal protection under the Fifth Amendment, so they could absolutely.
It was not under federalism grounds.
What do you mean by federalism grounds?
In that that marriage is something that is not to be determined by the federal government, and that it is something that is left to a decision that's left up to the states.
Oh yes, that was
much like education and a number of other things.
Right, which is odd because, of course, their biggest opinion in the last 50 years on it, Loving versus Virginia, it doesn't take that tack at all. But Kennedy turns the conservative argument about states' rights against them and says, well, wait a minute, you're constantly for states' rights. We've got an area where the states have always been deferred deference on, and now you're saying when the states pass it, now it's going to be the federal government deciding. So that's what's a little dicey about the opinion. It's not clear. He says there's this broad equal protection argument under the Fifth Amendment, but it isn't within the context of this being a state right. So to your question, we just don't know. When that case gets up there, will those 5 votes be there or more to say you've got a nationwide right? We just have to get the case up there and see what happens, but only time will tell.
Depending on the state, too, you might have an argument with the full faith and credit. I mean, there's some states that honor full faith and credit, i.e. I'm heterosexual and I'm married in one state and the other state will honor it, and some other states won't. And I believe, actually, Arizona is one that won't. I mean, they just kind of, they don't make a big deal of it, but I mean, I think it's actually written into our Constitution or our laws somewhere that they don't really full faith and credit it. So,
well, and for folks who maybe haven't heard the term, the Constitution says, the U.S. Constitution, that says that one state shall give full faith and credit to the laws and acts of another state. So if you're married in, Illinois, you should say, well, I should be legally married in Indiana, or if I'm married in New York, why am I not married here? The problem is that has historically not always been applied to marriage. You could marry your first cousin in some states and not legally marry that person in another state. So it is a somewhat gray area, but I certainly look at the language and the emotion of Kennedy's opinion and the trend of it. Long term, they're done. It's just question how long and exactly how do we get there.
Yeah. It could be any number of ways, I think, is the answer. Who's going to be successful and in what circuit? I mean, just like some federal courts, you have people who are a little bit more liberal than others, and I'm sure that the lawyers who know what they're doing will want to pick the states to challenge and pick the cases that the courts that they want to go through. So
great. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. So we've actually gone almost 2 hours here. We usually only go 1, so 7 minutes to kind of wrap up. What's your final thoughts about today and waking up tomorrow?
I mean, I'm definitely hopeful for tomorrow. I think that there's a lot to celebrate from today, but it's also a renewed call to action. When I woke up this morning, the first thing I did, I read the decision from the court. I wanted to get my hands on the actual text and say, since this is something that so intimately affects my life and my future, like Joe was saying earlier, being a single man, I hope one day to be able to marry and have children and a family that is accepted and celebrated by the country of my birth. I think that I was struck with the progress we were making, but also the leaps that we must still go to ensure that everyone who lives here in this country has full equality. And so I wake up tomorrow a little bit more proud, I guess, in the movement and the history, a little more humbled by the distances we have come in the last 50 to 60 years, and a little more determined to continue the fight on a local level.
Yeah, and I want to I want to fly to San Francisco this weekend. I've been kind of tracking
I
our
know,
friend
Cleve.
tracking our friend Cleve Jones today, and it just sounds like it's going to be one huge freaking party.
Yeah.
Castro's already shut down, and it probably will be until next Monday. So, oh, wouldn't that be glorious?
Yeah. What about you, John?
You know, when I was driving, Grant says I've got a good radio voice. So
you do.
It's just pure gold.
So when I was driving to work this morning about 7 a.m. and I turned on CNN on the radio and I was listening to this and the emotion, the moment, as you said, Rebecca, this is built on the backs of generations of gay men and women who've sacrificed the blood of those who've gone before. And to hear the language from the DOMA opinion especially, tears started running down my cheek, and I was really struck because I'm not a particularly emotional person, but to partake in the full meaning of American freedom, even for the peace that we've got, we cannot settle for where we're at, but today was a great, great victory, and we should enjoy this moment. You know, I'm just very grateful to be here. We are the generation that's going to finish this and to take us over the finish line, and I'm very grateful for that.
Wow, well said. I got nothing after that, Joe.
A number of coworkers. I work at Arizona State University at the Honors College and take care of a lot of creative stuff for them. And a number of coworkers they knew about it. They congratulated. They're like, "Hey, this is a great day. You got to go have cocktails." I'm like, "I know. I got to go run the show. Whatever. We're gonna have cocktails on the show, you know." And for me, over the last couple of years, you do look at the various things that have come to fruition. Don't Ask, Don't Tell is gone. DOMA is essentially struck down. Prop 8 is essentially struck down. You have all the different states that have been gaining this. All of this has been happening since basically, in the past 10, 15 years, countries and whatnot. So it's really magical to see. And for me, who grew up in from what I understand now, was, fairly conservative household and got put through all these different things and have struggled with my own sort of sense of self because I've had to sort of undo all that programming. This is just another good little check off the list of, this is great. This is, we're marching towards the point where no one's going to care if you're gay, straight, left, right, up, down, whatever. And the fact that once these things get written into law, it's only a matter of time before society is it's not an issue at all. So, cheers to that.
Absolutely. Yes. And I would just encourage everyone listening that as we celebrate and as we, raise our glasses and our fists in the air to whoop and holler, that there is a contingent out there that, could be harmful. So just make sure that you watch each other, watch yourself, watch your surroundings, because I don't want to pick up the newspaper or watch on the internet someday and find out that you're been a victim of gay bashing. We want everybody to stay safe during this. Got a lot to celebrate, and our health is one of them. So
on to tomorrow.
Absolutely on to tomorrow. So thank you for listening to us for the last 2 hours. We had a lot of good information, a lot of good calls. I'm excited about that. And hopefully Kathy will be done traveling next week, and she'll be back. I miss her. We'll be back 7:30 p.m. next Wednesday. As always, during the week, you can interact with us on Facebook at the Q Talk The Agenda, and listen to some of our repeats and catch some of the other great shows on this awesome network. It's internet. You never know what people are going to be drinking or what they're going to be saying. So, and thank you, Joe. We're at like 3 years here, and this is all your dream. So
you sure are. It's pretty awesome.
It is awesome. So everybody be safe. Everybody be happy, and get up tomorrow and do some good work. And we'll see you next week. And thank you, John and Grant.
Thank you.
Thank you.